And as we go on live, as most of the time, the live feed goes on all the social media network. The podcast picks up pretty quick. So welcome to Bridges Live. I'm Dr. Paul Dyer. Welcome to talking about education. Let's talk education. As most people can see that scrolling above the line, it's let's talk about education. As most of you know, all my shows have everything to do with three things: information, understanding, and action. If you understand something, then maybe you can put yourself into an action. And if you haven't heard it, this is where you get some of the information. So I'm going to let my great guests come on and introduce themselves, and what we're going to be talking about is strong schools. But go ahead. Anyone can introduce himself first. Dave looks afraid. Doesn't everyone think that Dave looks afraid? So he can go first, and then we'll go from there.
So my name is Dave Heilker, and I am the communications specialist with Strong Schools Maryland. I've been with Strong Schools off and on since its inception in 2017, and I am pretty jazzed to be doing work on the accountability and implementation of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future with Fidelity. And I'll pass it off to Shamoya.
Great. You see how he teased us there? People are like, what's the blueprint? People know blue crabs in Maryland, but they don't know anything about Blueprint. But thank you, Shamoya.
Good evening. I'm Shamoya Gardiner, the Executive Director of Strong Schools Maryland. In addition to this, I am also a former middle and high school science teacher. I taught all boys in Jacksonville, Florida, and the experiences I had really guide the work that we do every day and our work to ensure that all students in the state receive a world-class education.
Great.
Maya?
I am a science geek, so we're hitting on all cylinders. I'm a physics and cellular biology geek, so I love it.
Hey, I taught biology.
Awesome. And I'm Maya Bond. I am the newest member to the team, and I'm the local organizer.
And that's how we met, organizing, because Maya had jumped onto one of our meetings of the Caucus of African American Leaders of Maryland. She gave an amazing presentation. And as people know, I like to bring all the things and the needles and threads I come through this state, our country, and the world, and bring it to all my audience to say, hey, have you heard? And when I heard about Strong Schools, I'm like, education, we know, is abysmal here in the United States, and we know it's disastrous in Maryland. So who wants to, since you're the director, Shamoya, tell us, what is Strong Schools?
So first, I would be remiss if I didn't point out that public education is absolutely in the midst of a crisis, but I wouldn't describe the state of schools in Maryland as abysmal or dire. In fact, that's a large part of the reason why Strong Schools Maryland exists.
Awesome.
We came into existence in about 2016 in direct response to the formation of the Kirwan Commission. That's how we ended up with the Blueprint. And frankly, the reason that commission existed is because our state legislature understood our constitutional obligation to provide for a quality, fully funded public education system. So we organize our teams of 10. Maya can tell you just a little bit more about that in a second. But I'm proud to say that we mobilized over 30,000 Marylanders to fight for fully funded world-class public schools.
So as we are, some people have great experiences in schools, and some people, it's the scale always goes in no matter what state you live in, right? I'm a native New Yorker, and then some New York schools are amazing, and some New York schools are so not, right? So in any state, there is a large gap. Is this blueprint going to bring that gap down, or is it just another option?
Are y'all passing it back to me? Maya, you
Anyone?
Yeah, so the blueprint is actually, it's law, so it is a mandate for all of our Maryland schools. As Shamoya mentioned, this came out of the Kirwan Commission, and the blueprint was passed in 2021, and it provides $30 billion to public schools across the state over the course of the next 10 years.
Yeah, and in addition to that amazing figure that Maya just pointed out, we're talking about 30 billion with a B, not million, dollars invested in our public schools. And yes, that's a lot of money. What really matters and what's really unique about the blueprint is the specific intention behind those investments. So for example, we are seeing a whole lot more community schools, which are schools that basically have a coordinator in place who works at the school building, knows the students, the staff, the families, understands what the needs of the communities are. And it's that person's job to bring in partnerships so that, say you have students who don't have access to stable housing. Their families are highly transient. They may be in a homeless shelter. They may be staying with family or friends. A community school that is fully operational has the capacity to form partnerships with housing services, with organizations, with individual people who may be able to then house those families so that the very basic needs of all students are met. That's just one of the many ways that the blueprint works towards educational equity because to your earlier question, the overall point is to bring about world-class schools for every single student. You are right. We don't currently have that now. There are far too many disparities, especially along the lines of race and socioeconomic class. But the blueprint, fortunately, is something that the state of Maryland is actively doing to close those gaps.
Then, we know just not just in this state, you hear the rhetoric that people want voucher systems. So even though we are in the state of Maryland, most people know that I'm in Maryland, but I travel out a bit. But we're talking about strong schools. Is strong schools in other states or is it just Maryland?
Strong Schools Maryland is a Maryland-based, brand new, Maryland-only organization. We do have a couple of partners in other states who are really interested in the way we've organized and the work we've done with the blueprint, but we're proud to say that only Maryland can claim us.
So let's get it out there. And I think, Dave, you say your communication. So if people are interested to learn more about how can they establish a strong school like you are doing here in Maryland, who do they contact and what's the phone number? Are you giving them your house number? Are you giving...
I think your best bet on that would be to go to our website, strongschoolsmaryland.org, and email us at hello@strongschoolsmaryland.org. And reach out and say that you're putting together a platform or that you have a suite of policies in your jurisdiction that you'd like to work on education reform with. And we'd be happy to chat with you. It's going to, as we approach session in 2023, I know our time is going to become a lot more kind of hyper focused on what we're doing here in Maryland, but up until that point, I'm sure we'd be happy to at least hop on a Zoom with you.
That's not gonna be the last time, people. And remember, you listen to Bridges Live. You listen to all my live interviews here throughout the week. I know I have regular shows here on Mental Health Mondays, and then You Be the Judge every Wednesday at 6 p.m. with my other co-host, Judge Claudia Barbara and Marilyn Pierre. So back to Strong Schools Maryland. What do we say about the voucher system? Does that play into the blueprint of the education process?
So the blueprint for Maryland's future is operations funding for public schools. So vouchers for private schools, it's just not the realm of the bill. And we explicitly focus on the realm of public education. What I can say is that the blueprint does include public charter schools that are a part of various local school districts across the state. So any public school in the state is included in the blueprint, but if it's not public, not the blueprint's territory.
I do know we're recently working with a couple of individuals, and we'll be working on a new charter school that'll be coming out in 2024 in Maryland. And I know I'm writing the curriculum. I'm part of the curricular writing, and we're going from 9th grade to 12th grade. It's going to be a small charter school, but education has always been highly, highly emphasized in many cultures, community, and spaces. But yet somehow we get lost in transition of how we are teaching certain individuals. What do you say for that or against that? Because things have came out that's saying certain ways to teach black boys isn't this, certain ways to teach black children is not this, and maybe we should just teach all kids this. So do you have I guess my question is what do you say of how the education is being taught thus far? And
Oh,
anyone?
okay. Someone remuted. I mean, I would just say that the focus of the blueprint is on equity. It's also on improving the quality of life for teachers, but also the quality of the teachers in the classroom, right? So it's not just about paying teachers more. It's about teachers being paid more because it's commensurate with their qualifications as, people who hold advanced degrees, people who do a lot of additional individual development, it's things like that. When we talk about how we're teaching students, and I've not spent any time as an educator in a classroom, so I won't speak to any of the specifics on that. But when we talk about how we're teaching students, one of the things we need to consider is that, throughout the several hundred years that America has been a project, a lot of folks have been left behind, right? And whether that's because they're poor or black or immigrants or what have you, we leave folks in a position where it's like you said earlier. A lot of people who go to public schools say, I had a really great public school experience. I turned out great, yada, yada, yada. A lot of people are like, I went to public schools and I work 2 jobs and I work 30 hours at each of those jobs and I don't get benefits from either of them and I'm barely making ends meet and I'm living paycheck to paycheck. So what's the disparity? It's not that like one of them is just like inherently stupid or something, right? Like that's very unlikely. What the case is that we see things, we talked a lot, over the last year about things like generational wealth. And we see that when people aren't afforded the same privilege as their peers whose families make, twice or 3 times the income, that even with the same materials being taught to them, if it's not culturally sensitive, it doesn't really have the same impact long term. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to do, and I think what the blueprint is seeking to lessen the gap in are things that center on equity and center on being sensitive to the individual student and making it part of the community, making education a community-based thing.
One of the things when you talk about community is that the large part of community doesn't agree on what the kids should be learning. Like behind me, there's a lot of books. I mean, there's a lot of books that kids are not. Mm-hmm. They're not going to read for whatever reason. Maybe the school doesn't believe it. Maybe the teacher doesn't approach it. So the Strong Schools Maryland, does they have an influence on that also when it comes to the funding of what's being taught? Because, go ahead.
Yeah, so decisions about school curriculum remain with the Maryland State Department of Education, which has a role to play in the blueprint, but the relationship doesn't go the other way. So the blueprint does not dictate school curriculum. What it does do that's really exciting in the 3rd pillar is create new college and career readiness pathways. So over the next couple of years, you're going to see a whole lot more career and technical education programs. And if we have our way, and if your listeners join us in engaging in local planning, we can ensure that those CTE program offerings are one, in alignment with what workforce needs will be for the state in the future so that there are actually jobs waiting on them. 2, that students are supported in getting credentials. So once they go through and are deemed college and career ready in high school under the blueprint, hopefully by the end of 10th grade, but they'll have until they graduate for that to happen, they are eligible to earn certifications so that when they do get their high school diploma, they don't have to go to anyone's job training program. They can go directly into the workforce or continue a relationship with someone they had an internship or apprenticeship with, because to Dave's earlier point, the focus of the blueprint is bringing out educational equity. And if we do have educational equity and we do have these high quality programs and those curricular offerings, then we are very, very also likely to see more economic equity across the state.
I know when I was in school, they had certain programs where they had internships within the schools and people could go to, basically it was learning how to do whatever the job it was, whether it be line work, an electrician, or beauty, or whatever it was. There was like 6 different things, and people went straight from that to the career after graduating high school. And I know a lot of that's been removed out of certain schools in certain places in certain states. We have very few kids entering kindergarten from the black community. They're not ready for kindergarten. That in itself creates the disparity in education. Does the blueprint somehow raise that to a level of this has got to be fixed also? Because I know that's early childhood education, and we're working with public community schools. So is that part of that? Because a lot of people can't get to early childhood because they don't have transportation. They don't have the means of getting there. And it's like, so the school's over there. If they don't provide a bus, I'm not able to get my child there. Is that something the blueprint is is also focused on with the other things you are doing?
Yes, and I have a few caveats in that answer. So
Sure.
let's start from like the 5 pillars of the blueprint, just so everyone knows, and you can find this on our website as well. First is early childhood education, so absolutely. Second is high quality and diverse. We mean racially diverse teachers and school leaders. Third is the new college and career readiness pathways. Fourth is more resources to ensure all students succeed. And that's where we see funding for things like special education, English language learners, students who are being schooled in areas of high poverty. That's where we get community schools and behavioral health supports from. And then the 5th pillar is governance and accountability. Because as Maya said earlier, we're talking about $30 billion. That's a lot of money. And we need to ensure that all of these systems work together coherently. So that's the first part. You bring up such a wonderfully valid point about transportation. That is an issue in kindergarten. That is an issue for pre-K access, for early Head Start, for students in high school, for educators themselves. The transportation issues we have are myriad and need to be addressed. We work in coalition with several partners who are directly addressing that work. We know we're the education people, but we also understand how all these policies are related to one another. So for folks who are excited to see the early childhood education provisions of the blueprint be implemented, we're talking about very nearly universal pre-kindergarten.
Nice.
And that is for all 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds. Actually, all 4-year-olds and all low-income 3-year-olds are what we call Tier 1. And that would be a student who would be, the first English language speaker in their family, has developmental delays, whatever it may be. We get them in earlier so that they have that earlier access to high-quality learning opportunities. The blueprint also requires that school systems administer a racially and culturally unbiased kindergarten readiness assessment. I know, what a demand, right?
Oh my God, you're radical.
Come on, it's the blueprint. That's just what it is. The question is it happening, right?
Yeah.
Because we can say all the nice words we want. That unbiased KRA is supposed to be administered this year, and I would encourage you and your listeners to ask questions about whether that's actually happening in every single school system. The point is, though, that coming up in March, by March 15th, there is a major opportunity. I'm going to pass it over to Maya to talk about in a second, where all of our interests around early childhood education, the things that are in the blueprint, the things like transportation that are not specifically addressed in the blueprint, can come together. So Maya, do you want to talk about local implementation plans?
Before Maya goes, I'm on two boards of the Equity Advisory Board for the county schools. One's in Anne Arundel, one's in Montgomery County. And the conversation we have in reading the paper and policy, it's not equity. It's not equal on a lot of, just the verbiage, it's like insane. And you would think, like, who wrote this madness about this? But go ahead, Maya.
Yeah, so as Shamoya mentioned, the local implementation plans will be released March 2023. And we are starting to organize our teams of 10 around getting in contact with their local board of education and their blueprint implementation coordinators. So just a snippet about the teams of 10, that is our organizing model. We have team leaders from across the state that have joined and created their own teams. So parents, students, community members, whoever cares about education, cares about advancing equity in education, can form their own team. We have a sign up on our website. But to be a team leader, you just have to be curious. And we hold monthly meetings the first Wednesday of every month at 6:30, and we go through the state level implementation updates that are happening from the Accountability and Implementation Board, that is the new state agency that was created under the blueprint to ensure that the blueprint is being implemented in its fullest capacity. And the Maryland State Department of Education as well has their own part to play in the blueprint implementation process. So we give those high-level overviews, and then also check in with team leaders who are connected to their local boards of education to give us some information about how blueprint implementation is going. We, at the end of last year, made year one progress reports because it was the first year of blueprint implementation. And so we reached out to, we meaning Strong Schools, team leaders and their teams of 10, as well as our team, reached out to superintendents, to the local boards of education, their presidents, their chairs, and the blueprint implementation coordinators that are also mandated in the blueprint.
Maya,
every county has one.
What are some of the responses you get from the superintendents in the state? Is it good? Is it some type? What is it? You don't have to give names unless you really want to, and I'm okay with that. But if you can rate some of the superintendents, is it an even 5? Are they really this for it? Are they not so much? Or what is it?
Yeah, so you can actually find that information in our year one progress reports. We have a progress report for the state as a whole, and then we have it broken down by county. And in our outreach, we requested the mandated reports that each county was actually supposed to, or did give to the state. So we requested that information as well, and then created these progress reports. So all of that information is there.
Most of the people you don't know, if you're watching this or you're going to be listening to this on a podcast, it will be the links on the progress reports and the website. You can go to the YouTube channel and catch it up there, or some of the other channels that's going to be posted on the link. But for the people that are listening live now, how do people get to the website?
Yep, so it's strongschoolsmaryland.org/progress reports.
Okay, and then if someone wants to get involved, do they just still go to the website and say, I'm interested, and what can I do?
Absolutely. So there's different ways to get involved. Like I mentioned, you could start your own team, be a team leader, and that link, I'll put that in the chat for folks on YouTube, but it's strongschoolsmaryland.org/get-involved. So you'll be able to join and start a team of 10 there. We'll gather your contact information, and I am the first point of contact for team leaders, so you'll hear directly from me. And then we also have a newsletter. So we send out emails regularly with updates for folks who may not even be a part of a team, who just want to stay up to date on the blueprint. And then we can, you can always find us on social media. So on Twitter and Instagram, our handle is @StrongSchoolsMD. And on Facebook, our handle is Strong Schools Maryland.
So, as we close up this show, again, I want to thank everyone for coming on Bridges Live, and let's talk about education. There's lots of things we did not cover, but if there's something that I want you guys to each pick one thing that you want to say that really needs to be said at this time, even though we're going to have a further conversation, further information, and further put people into action. But right now, what do you think it is that you're thinking of? Bruce?
Well, for me, the bottom line is we want students, families, communities who are being directly impacted by the blueprint to have a voice in the local implementation.
Awesome. Next, Dave?
I would say that there are two big agencies that have a lot to do with what's going on here. That's the Accountability and Implementation Board and the Maryland State Department of Education. Both of those agencies have just myriad ways for you to interface with them and give them feedback. Go to their websites. Like you can Google Maryland State Department of Education or aib.maryland.gov is the Accountability and Implementation Board. Give them your feedback because they are listening. We've got some decent folks over there who really want to know what people think. But if they don't hear from us, then they're not gonna be able to consider our feedback. So definitely be engaged with those folks. Be engaged with your elected officials. We have an election coming up in a couple weeks. Make sure that you're holding them accountable to the blueprint and to education, and make sure that they're making education a priority.
And Shamoya? Am I pronouncing that right? I don't think I am.
You are. It's perfectly phonetic. You've been doing great. All right. In addition to what my fantastic team has already said, I'll just make an appeal to the folks who are so sick and tired of systems that are constantly betraying them, because that is a real feeling. It is valid, and still it is not an excuse to disengage. We are talking about $30 billion over the next decade, and there are a great many opportunities to get engaged and have your voice heard. You could hop on a Zoom call just like this and impact education policy for the next 10 years. We need your voice. So the lowest hanging possible fruit is to go to strongschoolsmaryland.org, get connected with us. Please do so, and we'll see you out there.
So I want to add my point to it, and I thank you really so much because, again, when we talk a lot of things about social justice and equity and equality, and we use these words almost like fluff, but they don't really have an adhesive component to it, because education to me is the umbrella that connects all things. It is hard for people to have economic wealth if they are unable to learn. And me being a brain science guy, I just realized by doing certain studies that so many people who are in economically depressed areas have a hard time developing a prefrontal lobe cortex. And so with that, they are unable to ever be taught. No matter how great the teacher is, they are unable to absorb. So the systems, the nervous system, the limbic system, all those things are affected because of the area we live in. So if we don't help each other, and here's the other thing, if you're having the greatest experience or moderately pretty good experiences with education with your child, I think it's a duty of community and in service of humanity to wonder, does people in the other classrooms, are they having the same experience? It's not just my child, it's the child. It's not just the child, it's the community. It's not just the community, it's our country, it's our nation. So if we just start this really small, we can build a better country and a better world just through wondering, what can I do to help someone else be better? And if that's going to strongschoolsmaryland.org and saying, I want to get involved just a little bit, thank you. But if you're not getting involved, that concerns me. So I hope people take some of that food and seed for thought and plant it, and hopefully it grows into something. But again, I want to thank everyone for listening to Bridges Live and talking about education with Strong Schools Maryland. And I'm excited. Maya and I ran into each other because, there's so much work to do, and so let's get to work. Thank you. Thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back another time with this lovely guest. We're talking more about strong schools and get to more specific points about what is being done and how it's helping the school system and education. Thank you. Perfect. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Dr. Dyer. Really appreciate it.